The heavy sound of a bulldozer's gears ripped me out of sleep. I opened my eyes in a jolt, and the first rays of sunlight were barely creeping through the old factory's windows. I immediately recognized that demolition noise, something that promised destruction. I jumped out of bed, grabbed the first jacket I found, and ran to the front door. Out there, the scene froze me in place. A huge yellow bulldozer parked just a few meters from the factory entrance, its engine growling like a predator waiting. Two men in suits were watching the scene with satisfied smiles. The taller, leaner one walked toward me with a shiny ADU, Urban Development Association, badge hanging around his neck. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. John Hayes? I'm Derek Wilson from the ADU. This building has been condemned due to severe structural violations. We have orders for immediate demolition. My heart pounded, but I kept a firm stance. There must be some mistake. I haven't received any official notice. The second man, shorter and stockier, came closer. He was wearing sunglasses even in the early morning, and his badge identified him as Scott Miller. Notifications were sent weeks ago, Scott said with disdain. This factory poses a danger to the community. We have technical reports proving irreparable structural problems. Derek handed over a folder with documents. Signed by the city's Public Works Department. You have 15 minutes to remove your personal belongings. This is absurd. You can't just show up and... Derek interrupted me. We can and we will. The law is on our side, Mr. Hayes. I took a deep breath. This moment called for courage, not anger. Gentlemen, you've made a terrible mistake. This isn't just any property. It's a bankrupt industrial relic. Scott shot back. No. It's a federally protected shelter for vulnerable youth and homeless people. I pointed to a small sign next to the door. We've been operating under the Federal Emergency Shelter Program since 2018. We have certification and absolute legal protection. I saw Derek's smile falter for a moment before he recovered. Shelter? That story is convenient, but our records only show an abandoned factory. I have documents proving everything in our office. Besides, there are 17 people sleeping inside right now. Young people that the city failed to protect. Scott stepped threateningly toward me. You have 5 minutes to produce that documentation, or the bulldozer starts its work. As I turned to get the documents, Derek motioned to a third man I hadn't noticed before. He quickly disappeared next to the building. I returned with a folder of documents, but before I could hand it over, I realized what was happening. The man had shut off the building's water supply. The message was clear. Even without demolishing, they would find ways to kick us out. This is intimidation, I shouted, moving toward the man fiddling with the water valve. Derek stepped in my path, chest puffed up, directly confronting me. Watch what you do, Hayes. Assaulting an ADU agent has serious consequences. That's when I realized that we weren't just dealing with bureaucrats. There was something else going on. The factory door swung open, and Eleanor appeared, still half asleep, her hair a mess. John? What's happening? We've got no water. Derek and Scott exchanged looks. Eleanor's presence changed the dynamic. She wasn't just any resident. She was living proof of what I was saying. Go back inside, Eleanor, I told her without taking my eyes off the agents. These men are leaving. Nobody's leaving, declared Derek, signaling the bulldozer's operator. Start the operation. I didn't think twice. I ran and positioned myself right in front of the machine, blocking its path. You're gonna have to get through me first. To my surprise, Eleanor joined me, her face determined even though fear was visible in her eyes. And for me too, Derek shouted to the operator. Move it! They're in your way! The bulldozer roared and began to slowly move in our direction. I closed my eyes for a moment, bracing for the worst, when the shrill sound of sirens filled the air. 3 black vehicles with federal insignia screeched to a halt. A tall man with graying hair and a severe expression got out of the first car. "Marshall Cooper, Federal Department of Justice," he announced while showing his badge. "This operation is suspended. All ADU employees are under arrest for investigation." Relief washed over me like a wave. Eleanor took my hand, her eyes shining with held-back tears. We were safe, at least for now. Marshall Cooper kept Derek and Scott in custody, while 2 federal agents handcuffed them. I watched the scene with a mix of relief and confusion. How did the feds know we were in danger this very morning? "Mr. Hayes, we need to talk," Cooper said, guiding me aside. Eleanor followed us, still shocked by the confrontation. "We've been monitoring the ADU for almost 8 months." "Monitoring?" I asked, running my hand through my hair. The sun was now fully shining, lighting up the courtyard where, minutes before, we almost lost everything. "Urban Development Association is at the center of a massive real estate fraud scheme," Cooper explained in a low, controlled voice. "And your shelter isn't their first target, just the boldest so far." Eleanor sighed in disbelief. "So they're not just incompetent, they're criminals?" Cooper nodded gravely. "The ADU has set up an entire system to force acquisition of properties. They fake structural reports, manufacture code violations, and intimidate property owners. Once they get possession, they resell the land to partner construction firms at prices way above market value." "But why our shelter?" "We're a protected institution," I argued, still trying to process how big this was. "Precisely because of that," Cooper answered, gesturing toward the old factory. "This property is located in an area that's appreciated exponentially over the last 2 years. Our informants say the ADU already has a buyer willing to pay millions for it as soon as they clear the way." One of the agents came over with an open laptop. Cooper turned the screen so we could see. "This is just a fraction of what we discovered. The ADU forced out dozens of families and small businesses in this district over the last 3 years." On the screen was a detailed presentation showing photos of buildings I recognized, all now demolished or drastically remodeled into luxury projects. Among the documents, I recognized names of some of our shelter residents, people who had told unbelievable stories about unexplained evictions. "Oh my God!" I murmured, finally realizing. "Some of our residents are direct victims." Eleanor squeezed my shoulder. "Mrs. Gladys from the 3rd floor always said her eviction never made sense. Her building was new, it had no structural issues." Cooper closed the laptop. "Exactly. The ADU didn't expect to find a federally protected shelter. When they discovered it, they thought they could use quick intimidation tactics before you could get federal protection involved." "How did you find out about today's attack?" I asked. "Legally authorized wiretaps," Cooper replied. "We've been building a federal case for months. The attack on your shelter was an open and shut example." As Cooper spoke, I watched Derek being loaded into the squad car. His look of hatred as he glanced in my direction was unmistakable. Scott, on the other hand, looked nervous and was talking fast with the agents, already trying to negotiate, apparently. "What happens now?" I asked. "The investigation is expanding," Cooper explained. "Derek and Scott are just pawns. Our real target is the higher-ups at the ADU and their partners in real estate and the city hall. We believe corrupt officials are facilitating all of this." Eleanor, ever sharp, frowned. "That means the danger isn't over, right?" Cooper nodded solemnly. "Exactly. You folks have crossed some powerful people. I strongly recommend reinforcing your shelter's security while the investigation continues. I'll leave 2 agents on duty for a few weeks, but you'll need to be ready for the long haul." Cooper's words weighed heavily on my shoulders. The shelter, once just a refuge for many, would now have to transform into a fortress as well. In the following weeks, life at the shelter changed drastically. With Cooper's help, we secured emergency federal funding for structural upgrades. What once was just a distant idea became an urgent necessity to turn the old textile factory into a space that was both truly safe and fully functional. "John, the electricians have arrived to set up the new security system," Eleanor announced on a rainy October morning, 3 weeks after the incident. She was holding a clipboard with our endless list of improvements, the same list I had dreamed of gradually implementing over the years, now condensed into an emergency project. "Great, direct them to the control room we improvised." I finished adding fresh paint to the new walls of the community dormitory. "Did the contractor call? We need to reinforce that east wall before November's rains hit." Eleanor smiled and made a note on her clipboard. "Already taken care of. They're coming tomorrow at 7. You need to learn to delegate, John. You can't supervise every single aspect of the renovation by yourself." She was right. In the past few weeks, Eleanor had transformed. The shy young woman who arrived at the shelter 6 months ago after losing her apartment when her company went bankrupt was now coordinating much of the daily operations. Her degree in administration, which once seemed like just another sad line on an otherwise frustrating resume, had become our salvation. "You're right," I admitted, stepping down the stairs. "It's hard to let go of control, especially after what happened." "I understand that better than anyone," Eleanor replied, her voice soft but firm. "When I lost everything, I thought I had to control every penny, every decision, every minute of my day. It was exhausting and, in the end, useless." We walked together down the main corridor, now lit by new LED lights. The residents were busy in various tasks, some painting, others organizing donations, and a few studying in the new educational space. Adversity had forged a sense of shared purpose that we'd never felt before. "How's Miguel doing?" I asked, referring to the 16-year-old who had arrived at the shelter the week before after fleeing an abuse situation. "Better," Eleanor answered. "He offered to help out in the kitchen. Turns out he has experience working in his uncle's restaurant. I think finding a purpose is really helping him." We reached the old administrative area of the factory, now transformed into our operations center. Maps of the city covered one wall, with red markings indicating properties we suspected had been targeted by the ADU. Another wall displayed the renovation projects in progress. "I got a call from Marshall Cooper this morning," I said as I served coffee from a thermos for the both of us. "Scott is fully cooperating. He's already implicated 3 ADU directors and 1 councilman." "Good news," Eleanor said, although her face remained cautious. "But the big fish are probably already destroying evidence and building their defenses." "No doubt." Cooper mentioned that the investigation is expanding to the banks that finance the developments built on the illegally confiscated lands. We sipped our coffee in thoughtful silence, watching through the newly installed window as the residents worked together in the community garden we were setting up. Maria, a 70-year-old woman who had lost her home after a long hospital stay, was teaching 2 teenagers how to plant tomatoes. The scene warmed my heart. "You know what's ironic?" Eleanor commented, following my gaze. "They tried to destroy us, but ended up making us stronger." I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. "The factory has never felt so alive, even when it was just making fabrics. Now it produces something much more valuable. Hope," Eleanor added. "And community." The sound of hammers and circular saws filled the air as we headed toward the new meeting room on the 2nd floor. There, a group of residents was waiting for our weekly assembly, which we had set up as part of our new administrative structure. "Good morning, everyone," I greeted as I entered the room. "Before we start with this week's reports, I'd like to share some news. All eyes turned to me, expectant. Faces that once only showed the weight of survival now reflected genuine interest in our collective future. Our community foundation has approved our proposal for the professional training program. Starting next month, we'll have courses in computer skills, skilled trades, and professional cooking right here at the shelter. Applause broke out instantly. Carlos, a middle-aged man who had spent 5 years on the streets before finding the shelter, raised his hand. Does that mean we can get qualified for better jobs? Exactly, Eleanor replied, opening her laptop to show the presentation we had prepared. And more than that, we're negotiating partnerships with local businesses to secure job interviews for everyone who completes the courses. The meeting continued with renewed enthusiasm. We discussed progress on the renovations, assigned new responsibilities, and listened to ideas from the residents. The fear that had hovered over us since the ADU incident was gradually turning into collective determination. After the meeting, as people returned to their activities, Eleanor pulled me aside. I've been thinking, she began with a mix of hesitation and conviction in her voice. What if we turned our experience into a model for other places? The demolition attempt might have been the best thing that happened to us, but other shelters and vulnerable communities are still under threat. I looked at her face, lit up with the passion of a new mission. She had been broken by the system when she arrived, and now she wanted to fix it. The transformation was inspiring. What do you have in mind? I asked, already intrigued by the idea. A manual, a program, a community protection network. Her words flowed with increasing confidence. We can document everything we're doing here, not just the physical improvements, but the administrative systems, the safety protocols, the training strategies. Create a model that others can follow. I smiled, recognizing in Eleanor's proposal something I had long wanted but never been clear enough to articulate. A network of strengthened shelters. Exactly, she said, nodding eagerly. What happened to us isn't unique. It's systematic. And the response needs to be systematic too. I looked out the window at the city stretching beyond the walls of our old factory. Somewhere out there, other vulnerable communities face similar threats, without the federal protection that saved us. Let's do it, I decided. Starting tomorrow. The following months turned our routine into a series of testimonies, meetings with federal prosecutors, and endless document revisions. The investigation against the ADU grew exponentially, branching out in ways we hadn't initially imagined. On a freezing January afternoon, Marshall Cooper showed up at the shelter without any warning, his usually serious face sporting a contained smile. I was overseeing the installation of the new heating system when he arrived. Mr. Hayes, we have some important news, he announced, taking off his heavy winter coat. We secured the first convictions in the case. Eleanor, who was coordinating a computer class upstairs, rushed down upon hearing Cooper's arrival. We gathered in the new conference room where Cooper opened a folder full of documents. Derek was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, extortion, and obstruction of justice, Cooper explained as he slid a document toward us. He refused to cooperate until the very end, but it didn't matter. Scott gave us everything we needed. And what about Scott? Eleanor asked, carefully examining the files. 5 years with the possibility of parole after 3 in exchange for his full cooperation. He handed over documents, recordings, financial records, practically dismantling their whole operation for us. I flipped through the reports, and names of high-level ADU employees jumped off the pages alongside astronomical figures. This is way bigger than we imagined, isn't it? Cooper nodded gravely. You were caught in an $87 million scheme. The ADU systematically worked over the past 4 years to displace entire communities, demolish historical properties, and hand over prime land to partner developers at inflated prices. And the city hall? I asked, remembering our suspicions of official involvement. Cooper slid another document our way. Vice Mayor Winters was indicted yesterday. 2 council members are cooperating with the investigation in exchange for lighter sentences. The scheme involved fast-tracking project approvals, zoning changes, and ignoring environmental requirements. Eleanor let out an indignant sigh. How many people lost their homes because of this? We've documented 317 cases so far, Cooper responded, his tone heavy with the weight of reality. Legitimate property owners were forced to sell due to intimidation, forged assessments, or simply unbearable financial pressure. And these people? I asked, feeling a growing determination. Will they be compensated? Cooper closed the folder. That's the next step. The federal prosecutor's office is preparing a class action lawsuit. The properties that haven't been developed yet will be frozen, and we're working on establishing a compensation fund for the victims. That news brought a wave of mixed emotions. It was a victory, no doubt, but also a painful revelation of the damage caused. One more thing, Cooper added, handing me an official envelope. As a direct result of this case, the Department of Housing and Urban Development is expanding its shelter protection program. Your work here caught some attention in Washington. I opened the envelope with slightly trembling fingers, while Eleanor leaned in to read it with me. It was a formal proposal to transform our shelter into a pilot project for a new federal program, with substantial funding guaranteed for 3 years. That is... My voice trailed off for a moment. It's a chance to expand what you built here, Cooper finished. To turn this story of resistance into a national model. When Cooper left, Eleanor and I stayed in the conference room, absorbing the significance of the moment. The winter sun cast a silvery light through the newly installed windows, illuminating the city map on the wall, now marked with green dots indicating potential locations for program expansion. We have to tell the others, Eleanor finally said, her voice calm but determined. They deserve to know that their testimonies and their courage were worth it. That night, we held an extraordinary assembly. All the residents gathered in the newly renovated dining hall, many still in the uniforms of new jobs they had gotten through our training program. The silence was profound as we shared the news. This isn't just a legal victory, I concluded after explaining all the developments. It's proof that broken systems can be fixed when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice. Carlos, now employed as a maintenance technician at a local hospital, was the first to speak after I finished. So some of the people really are going to jail? It's not just scapegoats? Yes, I confirmed. And more importantly, there's a way for many people to get compensation for their losses. Maria, the elderly woman who had turned our community garden into a little productive wonder, raised her hand with a trembling voice. What about those who have already rebuilt their lives elsewhere? How will they know about this? Great question, Eleanor replied, stepping forward with her laptop. A significant part of the funding we received will be dedicated to exactly that, locating the ADU's victims and connecting them to the compensation process. In fact, we'll need volunteers for that work. Several hands went up immediately. The transformation was remarkable. People who had come to the shelter looking for temporary refuge were now volunteering to help others in similar situations. Miguel, the teenager who had arrived so scared months ago, surprised everyone by standing up. His once timid voice was now firm. We can use our programming classes to create a system that helps track these people. I've been working on a similar project in class. I felt indescribable pride in that moment. As ideas and plans started to flow, I realized we were witnessing the birth of something much greater than just a fortified shelter. 2 months later, in the spring, our efforts began to take tangible shape. The courtyard of the old factory, once desolate, was now hosting a small special event. A white tent had been set up, chairs arranged neatly in rows. A table with federal authorities, including Cooper and representatives from the housing department, sat at the center. "I'd never imagined we'd be here," Eleanor remarked as she adjusted the collar of her formal blouse while we watched people arriving for the ceremony. "From almost losing everything to this, to our new reality," I replied, nodding toward the official sign being installed at the main entrance. "Hayes Community Center, Pilot Project for Protected Housing and Social Development." Guests began taking their seats. Current and former residents, federal officials, representatives from other local shelters, journalists. Among them, I recognized faces that had appeared in the investigation documents, victims of the ADU who were now coming back not as residents, but as part of a healing and community rebuilding process. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Cooper formally presented the expanded program, emphasizing how one act of resistance, my confrontation with the bulldozer, had triggered structural reform in the system that protected vulnerable people. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd. Many had arrived at the shelter broken and hopeless. Now their eyes reflected something different: purpose, dignity, and belonging. "This place has always been more than just walls and a roof," I began. "Even when it was just an abandoned textile factory with leaking pipes and broken windows, it held a promise that no one would be abandoned and that everyone deserves a safe space to rebuild their lives." My words flowed with quiet certainty as I continued. "That bulldozer wasn't just threatening a building. It was trying to crush the last hope of people whom the whole system had already dismissed as invisible." I gestured to the renovated factory behind me. "Look at what we built together when we refused to bow to fear and intimidation. We didn't just remodel a building, we reformed a broken system. And this is only the beginning." After the official ceremony, while guests mingled outside enjoying the buffet prepared by residents trained in our culinary program, Eleanor pulled me aside. "I just got confirmation," she said, her voice mixing excitement and solemnity. "The first satellite shelter will be approved next week. That building over in the East Zone that we identified, it'll be the first in our expanding network." I smiled, feeling both the weight and the lightness of that achievement. "Who's going to coordinate? We need someone who truly understands our mission." Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. "I was thinking, if you agree, I'd like you to take on that responsibility." The proposal surprised me, though it made perfect sense. Eleanor had transformed from a vulnerable resident into an essential leader. Her personal journey made her perfectly qualified to expand our vision. "I can't think of anyone better," I replied sincerely. We walked together to the community garden, where Maria proudly showed her plants to a group of federal officials. The vegetables flourished in well-tended beds, a living symbol of the transformation we had nurtured. "Do you know what occurred to me?" Eleanor said, watching the scene. "Those ADU guys thought they were just demolishing an old building. They didn't realize they were up against something far more resistant than brick and mortar. A community," I finished. "And real communities don't crumble easily." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, I gazed at the old textile factory, now transformed, strengthened, and expanding. The building we nearly lost had become not just a shelter, but a home for dozens. Not just a refuge, but a beginning. Not just a stand against injustice, but a testament to what happens when ordinary people refuse to give in. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. And beyond those walls, the city spread out, not as a battleground for predatory speculation, but as a space of renewed possibilities, where our story of resistance now inspired others to stand firm against injustice.